Thank you for your participation and being on time. Good evening, everyone. We're so happy.
Recording in progress.
Great. So happy to see everyone. Your suggestions and your thoughts about our budget is really, really important to us as we put the budget together. And so we want to hear from all of you. So what I'd like to first do is go ahead and introduce our superintendent of schools and our director of finance, and then we'll come back to me and we'll talk about some group agreements, and then we'll move into the listening part. So I'd like to turn it over to Kevin, if you would.
Good evening, everyone. I'm happy to see our families on the call tonight as we have part 2 of this community engagement session, try to get feedback from our families to help inform some of the budget priorities for the 22-23 school year. So we are eagerly anticipating a rich discussion this evening and genuinely looking forward to your feedback as we continue to work on building our budget priorities behind the scenes. So again, my name is Kevin Walson. I'm your superintendent, and I will hand it over to our chief financial officer.
Thank you, Kevin. And I think Grace is going to help me with a few slides. I just wanted to take a minute or two just to try and bring us all up to the same place, so we have the kind of the same working knowledge of the budget, so that we will have a better discussion, I think, that way. And also along with that, show you where you can make a difference in the process at what points in time. So the first slide, next, Grace. Okay, so here in Connecticut, public schools are what's called fiscally dependent. And what that means is we depend on our city or town governments for our money. And as you know, here in Danbury, that's done through the local tax levy or the tax bills that we get. That's how we pay for our schools. And so the city council sets the tax rate, and they really have two different kinds of authorities. One is on operating budgets and one is on capital budgets. We're going to talk tonight about the operating budget, but just so you know, the capital budget is, I call it the bricks and mortar there on the slide. It's the big things. The career academies, some of the bigger projects, they may be things that the city's going to issue bonds on. They have absolute veto authority on those things. They call the shots. And on the operating budget, so including the school budget, they cannot make line item cuts on what we're doing. Unlike with the police department budget or the fire department budget, they could cut money for conferences or the amount of sand we're buying for the winter. They can do that with city departments, but for us, they can only set the overall level of our budget, and then the Board of Ed decides how to allocate that. So if we were to ask for $150 million, they might say, we're only going to give you 149, and then it's the board that would decide how to spend that 149. So that's kind of the background. And our budget and all municipal budgets start on July 1 and go to the following June 30th. So what we have in front of us and we're starting to prepare is the budget for next year, we'll call it, but school that begins in late August. So next slide, Grace. So when we build the budget, there's really, I like to say 5 component parts, and I'll just say briefly what those are. In the upper right, the salaries and wages, employee benefits, most of those come out of our collective bargaining agreements. Almost all of our employees are members of bargaining groups or unions. That's not unique to us here in Danbury. It's across Connecticut. That's been that way for a long, long time. So we bargain with our employees. If you look over to the left, we also have some amounts of money that we look to our principals and our program leaders to decide how to spend. This year, we're giving them a per pupil amount based on the enrollment we're expecting they'll have in September. So if a school's expecting 300 pupils and we're giving them $65 a pupil, you do the math, and that's what they can make decisions on. Of course, all their plans come up through us and the Board of Ed first, but that's a part of the budget. And then on the bottom there, some of our costs are fixed in the short run, I'll say. We have a contract, for example, with the school bus company, STA, that has 4 years to run on it. So we can change it up after that. But for now, it's a good contract, but it's not something we can change too much next year. In the middle there, we'll also have things that I'll call one-time needs that come up. Maybe we have to do some work in one of our school buildings, or maybe a copy machine has to be replaced, or a kiln in an art room, for example. The bigger things like that really can't come out of the per pupil amounts because it would take away all of a principal's money, and they wouldn't be able to do the things that they usually do. So there's some one-time things that occur. And then last but certainly not least are what we'll call improvements. And they may come from the Board of Education's goals or the superintendent's goals. We may be introducing a new curriculum, for example, in one of the subject areas, or maybe we're want to do something different with graduation requirements and things of that nature. So those are really things that make us a better school system. And, you don't want to become complacent with what you have. You always, want to keep moving forward. So those are the concepts that we build it with. And then, Grace, if you go to the next slide, let me just tell you what it looks like. So when we put together, this is our current year budget. And you can see there that most of our budget, and it's the same in other public schools, is for salaries. And the biggest part of that is our teachers. That's what most of our employees are. But also in that line are salaries for the custodians and the secretaries in the school, the safety advocates, everybody you see is right in there. And right beneath that are the employee benefits that go with those. Those are also bargained at the bargaining table, but there are things like the employer share of Social Security that everybody has to pay, or some things for workers' compensation. Health insurance is in there. That's the biggest thing in there, but they're kind of hard to change in the short run too, both of these first two items, because when you bargain with your unions, it's you might have a 2 or 3 year contract. So if you're coming up to negotiations, you can do some changes, but once you have one in, it's a little more difficult than that. Some of the other things that this is the way we group it. This is the way schools, the state of Connecticut likes schools to do it. But professional services, most of that are the tutors, which are work with our special education youngsters. Over $4 million of the 6 is for that. Underneath that, purchased property services. We didn't come up with these names, the state does, but that's to keep our buildings and facilities running in good shape. We might have some maintenance contracts, say on our boilers or the elevators, things like that. If we have to make repairs, that's where we put that money, but that's really just to keep things going well. Other purchase services, that's a big number, 16 million. But there's only a couple things in there, mostly our contract with the school bus company, STA. That's about $10 million. And it's for both public and non-public school students. We have to provide the same service to non-public schools as we do to our own students. So that's there, as well as some of our special education youngsters, their disabilities. We send them to out-of-district schools, and that's about $4 million a year. That's in that line too. So the transportation, the special ed tuitions takes that up. And then as you get further down, the supplies, those are the things if your children are in elementary schools, that's what they use every day in the classroom. They're consumable for the most part, but also textbooks are in there. Things, other supplies like electricity is considered a supply, believe it or not. Things that also for our athletic teams, uniforms and all that, all in supplies. Right now, our program improvement line is for technology. Some of the computers that we want to have you in your children's hands, that's where we put them, or servers and things like that we need in the schools. That's an improvement of $1.1 million there. And then finally, we have some money for dues and fees and teacher training and those kind of things. But so I think that the point I'd like to leave you with is a lot of this is hard to control in the short run, but there are areas where we can make changes fairly quickly and change priorities and things like that. So if you want to go to the next slide, Grace, there. With those two concepts, that this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to make our budget transparent, make it fair from school to school to school, stable and timely. And number 6 there, when I mentioned some of the improvements, we try and line up what we're doing with the goals that are set down for the district, the strategies and things of that nature. So maybe the next slide, Grace, there should be one on the timeline, isn't there? Somewhere. There it is. Okay. That's better than looking at a picture of me, right? I'll just walk through here, but the important thing is where you can, I think, make a difference. You see in the bottom left there, that's what we were doing all day today, trying to put the finishing touches on a preliminary budget that the superintendent and his cabinet can look at, get ready to send to the board. That's right around the corner. That'll start next week. And then before the middle of February, there in the upper left, that spending plan will be presented to the Board of Education. They'll take a look at it. But that's a point where I think you can make a difference if there's things in the superintendent's budget that you support. Our board likes to hear from you as they make decisions. If you have other ideas, you can email the board. They'll be read at the board meetings, or you can speak to them. And that's a good time because what happens is the superintendent's budget becomes the board budget at a certain point. We have it down there the middle of February. It's their budget. So if there's things that are important to you, that's a good time to let everybody know. And so we send it to the city council. And as I mentioned, they decide the level. And that's a good time to be heard. If we think that they're not going to accept it as is, and city councils, they like to tinker a little bit, to put it mildly, but that would be also a good time to be heard if you support something or want a budget to go through as presented, you can be heard at those meetings too. So that's the summary of it. We could take some questions now, or Ann, whatever you think should come next.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, John. I think that was really informative for our families that are on our meeting tonight and giving them an understanding of how this whole process plays out. I'd like to welcome those new folks that have joined us in the last couple of minutes while that presentation took place. And so we'd like to hear from you now. What's your hopes and dreams for your children, and how might this budget reflect some of those? And so if you can all stay on Zoom, we won't have anybody that's creating feedback. And then at the bottom of your screen, you should have a raise hand feature that's part of the reactions. And you can just press that, and then we'll call on you. And if you can keep your suggestions under about 45 seconds, that will be helpful. And that way everyone that's here can get in. So go ahead. I see our first family, the Rontos, up there. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you. So we wanted to chime in here for the budget because we want to make sure that there are items in the budget that help all learners. We understand that the achievement gap is one of the goals, closing the achievement gap, but we want to make sure it's closed in the right way, not by letting the kids who are at grade level just stagnate there and bring everybody else up. We want to make sure that all the children in their programs, to make sure that children of all levels excel, and that the funding is in that way equitable across all students in all students who need support, even if they are at grade level or above.
So one of the Danbury Public Schools, our vision is to aspire to advance all learners to their highest potential. So what we really want our district to look for, like Stephen said, is one of our priorities, to be increasing the acceleration for all students. We need to make sure what we are doing for the students who already can access the curriculum, to advance those students just as well as the students who are not accessing the curriculum just yet. Because
personally, we have students in all three grades, in all three schools, elementary, middle, and high school, and we found that is sorely lacking across all three school levels. And maybe that's a place where it fits into the program improvement category, John, that you were talking about, which is only 0.8%. I mean, it's a minuscule fraction. The bus company is 10 million. Out of district support for special ed, 4 million. I mean, those dwarf anything that, program improvement expenses that are in there. So maybe a little more funding for those kind of things would be appropriate. And by doing that, hopefully we can get more, the budget can go directly to servicing students in our district.
Great. Thank you for your thoughts. Those are wonderful.
Thank you.
Great. Another family? Got some new families on here. Don't be shy. We can wait. Go ahead.
And
go ahead.
I'm sorry, the Runce's family. I'm just wondering if mom or dad had any specific recommendations in terms of the type of supports you'd like to see in schools.
Go ahead. Go ahead and unmute.
There we go.
Go ahead.
Well, look,
sorry to put you on the spot.
No, it's perfectly fine. I guess specifically across all three, all three school types, elementary, middle, and high school, having more enrichment activities. When I say enrichment, I meant academic enrichment. We're not looking for more sports or in another art class. We want the kids who can and want to be challenged to be able to be, and not have. What teachers keep telling us is that they are spread too thin, and they have to take care of their attention and their ability to handle kind of bringing everybody together is spreading them too thin. So support for the teachers to let them support the kids who need more of a challenge.
And we understand, in the middle school, like there's the 8th grade advanced math, and then in high school there are the honors and AP courses. but, even starting at the elementary level and middle school, just more opportunities for these students who are excelling and who are meeting the standards already. What are we doing for these kids to further excel their education and not just, doing the bare minimum because they get it and they get it easy and quickly? We need to really strengthen and challenge those students.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for providing that additional clarification. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Minnie, you're up next. Where'd she go?
Okay.
Hi.
Well, good evening. So one of the questions, I joined late. I had technical issues, I guess, but I did miss out on the first part. But my question was, we all know there was learning losses that did happen simply because we were in a pandemic. I know there's monies put away for that. How are you addressing that?
Kevin, do you want to go ahead and take that one?
Right. So I think I can start with how we've invested our monies, from the American Relief Fund monies. So we invested considerably in student support specialists across our schools, which was providing intervention throughout many of our schools across the district. We hired 14 to 15 additional elementary teachers across our schools to help reduce class size. Certainly it helped to reduce our numbers for social distancing, but also helped to improve class size across the schools as well. The same is true of the high school. We hired 15 additional teachers, actually 15 plus additional teachers at the high school. We went from a 7-period day to an 8-period day. Again, this helped reduce class size by 3 or 4 students per class. This is not by any means, is this not to minimize the fact that our school is still overcrowded, but the investments were made nonetheless. And then finally, we had considerable counselors and pupil support staff. Also, we invested in with these monies to help provide additional social emotional support across the system. So the investments were considerable, and part of our effort over these next few years will be to make sure we don't lose this additional staff and investments that we made, and continue to advocate for a budget where we can keep those staff, because the impact is going to be over several years. It's not just going to be over 1 or 2 years.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Mr. Blanco. If you'd like to unmute yourself, and if you want to show your camera, there you are.
Yep. How's it going?
Sir?
Thank you. Well, first, I want to just thank you for doing this. One of the great things that I think about the pandemic has been this opening up of technology and making it so that more of the community can be involved in these processes. So that being said, I just have a couple of concerns. The first one, actually, Kevin kind of already addressed, which is, I know we've received a lot of money because of the pandemic emergency funding that came through. My concern is, how do we sustain that going forward? So, great investments were made in, support specialists, like you said. I think the idea of opening up the kindergarten building was a tremendous idea and a great one, and one that hopefully, carries forward. But sustainability is, partially going to be dependent on the funding. And, that funding was temporary and it's going to run out relatively quickly. So my concern is, one, how are we planning to, maintain these programs going forward? And then secondly, just along the same lines as the initial comments about enrichment programs, gifted and talented programs, and things like that, that can benefit our students in a general, in broad way. But not just academically. I mean, the academic piece is great, but I do think that, arts programs and and things like that to supplement what's already happening in the school buildings are great for the students as well. And I would like to see us find more ways to invest in that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Blanco. Those are wonderful thoughts. And Minnie, we'll go back to you. You had your hand up again?
No, that's a mistake. Sorry.
Okay. Who else would like to raise their hand and give us some thoughts about our budget? A couple of new folks on here. An educator, we can wait. You know, that good old wait time that we do. Go ahead, Mr. and Mrs. Rontos.
I just thought we'd share, since no one else was raising their hand.
Yes.
But what Kevin was saying about the money for staffing that we got for emergency funding with the interventionists and the counselors, I definitely agree that we do need to find a way to hold on to that staff. As well as find some money in the budget to allocate more funds to get more of those staff members. My understanding at the high school, hundreds of students are allocated to each counselor. So especially now, you know, with the pandemic and going forward, we need more guidance counselors.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Great. And Mr. Blanco, go ahead.
It's going to be
generating ideas here. It's great. Go ahead.
No, just thinking of one other program that I would love to see continue is the fact that all the students got Chromebooks that they were able to take home, and, you know, developing more professional development opportunities for the faculty to be able to leverage that tool in the classrooms, but also at home. And then, you know, connected to that as much as possible to do things for the families in the district so that we can learn better how to use those tools and how to support our students in using those tools.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And I appreciate those points. We are exploring ways to figure out how to do just those very things, particularly ways to use technology to connect our parents in a more efficient way and effective way with our parents, and for some fluid conversations. We want to capitalize on those gains that we've made in building partnerships with our parents during the pandemic. And I just want to echo your sentiments, because I feel like this was an aha moment for us. You know, I'm hoping we're on the back end of the pandemic right now, but, you know, we made significant gains during the pandemic. I mean, we've reached families in ways we've never reached them before. And we're going to build on those partnerships. And the one-to-one device initiative is, John will tell you, I think we've secured a grant to bring in additional laptops and Chromebooks into the school community. And this is an investment we are committed to. There are other investments that need to be made if we're going to get better. So I appreciate that recommendation as well.
Great. So we have a question that's come in on our Google Forms, and it says, how can parents advocate for increasing the funding we receive per child? Put that out there to anyone that has any thoughts on that. I'll read it again. How can parents advocate for increasing the funding that we receive per child? John
I think John pointed out some ways on how families can do that earlier. My connection is unstable, so I'll get out the way and let the experts speak to it.
Okay, go ahead, John.
And I just clarifying point. Are they speaking about the per pupil allocation that we've given to our schools to make site-based decisions, or the per pupil amount we get as a district as a whole? They'd be, I think, different answers depending. I guess we don't know since it came in on email, right?
Yeah. So let's address both. I think it's the second one. Grace has given me it's number 2.
I was agreeing. I was saying let's address both. The person didn't specify, so I think that's a great idea.
Sure. so the per pupil allocation or base allocation, this is really the first year we're trying to make put the decisions closer to the students, closer to the teachers, having really empowering our principals more than they have been before. Part of it is, this central office has other things they really need to be thinking about. You heard about the how do we sustain these things going forward? That's what we need to spend our time on here. And what we've done is we've looked pretty carefully at the amount, and we think it provides not only for the existing program that we have next year, but also gives the principals some flexibility if things change. We're still 8 months away from when school starts, so they'll be able to react and assist their teachers. And it's a little more, it is more than they've had before, particularly at the high school level. So I think I would ask for some patience this year. If we see it's not enough or not doing what its objective is, we'd be the first ones to change it. And I would say, to specifically answer the question, work through your principal at your school, and we need to hear from them too. So together, if there's an idea, we'd like to hear it. The overall per pupil spending, that's what we need to talk to the city council about. It's important that they hear what's on your minds too. For the same reason, these new things that are really making a difference that we need to sustain. They're funded with federal dollars, as the superintendent pointed out, but they're not going to last. So the idea would be to gradually increase the school budget, not in a large amount one year, but gradually over time. So maybe a little more than the inflationary increases that we'd be inclined to get. To do better, we need more. So I think that's how I would answer that question.
Great. Jen, can you elaborate a little bit more on what parents can do at a state level to advocate? And it might be a parent education piece that we need to think about bringing the Connecticut Finance Project in to speak at a higher level with our families here tonight. As to what they can do, but can you think of some off-the-cuff things that parents can do at a state level to help advocate to bring more money back into Danbury?
Yeah, so the state budget, which includes money for education, the money that we get, it's the way it works is the governor will propose something, but then our state representatives really can make a difference. So whether it's our state rep or the state senator here, just emailing them or calling them and saying they support something, or you think we'd like to get more money, they can be very, very effective and lobby for our cause. So I think that's what I would do as a parent. Let them hear from me. I don't know, Kevin, if you think there are other ways, or there's a better way than that, because it is state money. The federal money is kind of a one-time deal that came with the because of the pandemic. But on a regular basis, education is a state function, not a federal function or entirely a local function. So I think I'd look in that direction.
Kevin, did you want to comment on that?
No, and I'm okay.
Okay. All right.
I'm having a hard time.
All right. Let's go back over to the Rontoses. I think they have an idea or a thought on this. Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to respond to John's point about the funding being, on a state level. It's my understanding that Danbury gets either at the bottom or the lowest per student funding in the state of Connecticut. I mean, again, maybe that's not exactly right, but I think, we can't say that we receive our share of the funding per student, given the growth in Danbury over the last few years. And we need, whether it's the Board of Ed or John, I'm not sure, how you integrate into this whole thing, but we need some guidance and leadership. You guys, send us stuff. Let's start organizing so we can get, to the state level and bring, like you said, bring more money home for our students so we can get these programs and support that we need, whether, like we said, whether it's academic or artistic, we need funds here in Danbury for our kids, and we need some leadership. So I don't know who needs to start that. It's a Board of Ed thing, or it's a, it's another group, but we need to do it.
The funding, the per pupil amount that you're speaking about, it's called the net current expenditures per pupil. That's the one we all talk about all the time. It's supposed to equalize and put every school district kind of on the same accounting basis so they can compare. But what it does is it tends, the smaller districts generally have a higher per pupil, because there are certain things that you have to do no matter how big you are. And you don't have as many pupils to spread that cost over. So, and on the inverse, the larger districts like ourselves are spreading some of the, for example, there's one business manager, one athletic director, one high school principal, spread over, in our case, almost 12,000 pupils. So the amount per pupil, the larger cities and towns are generally towards the bottom of that. But you're absolutely right. We need to bring that up. And I think some of these ideas that we've talked about, for example, the improvements, some of the new things, that's where we really need your help, convincing, the budget makers, the city council, that it's important and it's time and it's money well spent. So I know I said it before, but I think letting the city council also hear helps us a lot.
Great. Thank you, John. Did we have somebody else that raised their hand? No, I don't see anybody. Okay. So we'll probably come back to that thought in a minute. But in the meantime, we have another question that has come in on the sheets that people were able to submit. What exactly does the money per pupil pay for? And does that change the way Title I funds are allocated and spent?
Okay, so I'll take that one. The chart, the page that you saw with the line items, I know it was kind of a boring slide. So what the state will do is they'll say, every city and town's a little different in terms of who pays for what. For example, some schools may pay for crossing guards. In another city, their police department employees, or nurses. In some places, they're city employees, some places they're not. So what the state will put out some guidelines, and they'll say, okay, at the end of the year, what did you spend? And by the way, if you had some things that your city did, we want you to add that or subtract it, or if you got federal monies, you should add or subtract it. So in the end, that per pupil is really the instructional cost. It takes out, for example, if we had bonds to pay for the career academy, that wouldn't count. It's really your operating budget per pupil that you have there. That does not affect the amount of federal money that you get. Most of our federal monies that we get year in and year out are entitlements. That means that everybody is entitled to a certain amount of that federal money. There are formulas that are based on your demographics, your size, but I think many of you probably heard of the Title I program that helps teaching mathematics, science, English in certain schools. All the cities and towns get that, whether you're Bridgeport or Darien or anywhere else. But some get more than others. But the point being that those formulas are not dependent on your school budget, and almost all of our grants are that way. There's some for special education and other purposes. However, there also are other grants, competitive grants, based on how you're going to spend the money, who you are, that kind of things. We anytime there's a competitive grant that we think we have a chance for, we're applying for it, and we have a bunch of those. It's not as much money, but every penny helps. So I think that answers it. That's what the per pupil is. It doesn't affect our entitlements.
Right, and I will just add regarding Title I specifically anyway. That allocation is determined by the percentage of students who are eligible for free or reduced lunch. And to John's point, that does not have an impact on the per pupil expenditure. It's separate. It's federal monies made available by the federal government to our school district. And the schools are eligible, again, based on the percentage of students eligible for free or reduced lunch. And comes to the districts as a supplement to those schools.
Great. So that's all the questions that we have that came in from the general public. I'd like to route it back to anyone here on tonight's meeting that would like to make a comment or share with something. Oh, Grace just sent me, we have one on how much of the budget is put towards mask, protective equipment, and COVID-related needs.
Okay, I'll answer that one. So we've gotten three federal grants. They're managed down through the states. Most of you may have heard the name of the CARES Act that came out really right after our first lockdown in March of 2020. That was to buy a lot of PPE. If you needed to buy some of the student Chromebooks and things like that. And then we got a second grant. You'll hear us calling them ESSER grants, educational something. We got a $11 million grant for that that's spread over 2 years. And much of that is used for those kind of things, as well as some of the items that the superintendent mentioned. And then there's a third grant also called ESSER. They call it ESSER 3, and that can be used for those kind of things. The school operating budget isn't being used for those kind of things. But quite frankly, we don't need to, because we're getting all this additional money for that, as are other schools, other cities and towns, same thing.
Great. Thank you for answering that. So I'll give it one more round if anybody else has any other thoughts or questions. No. So I'd like to thank my team, Grace, Estella from our Morris Street FRC, and Carmen for our parent educator at Morris Street FRC for working so hard to get families here and to help put this together in the PowerPoints and get everybody on board. And I'll put in our addresses, our email addresses, where folks can contact us or send suggestions. And Kevin, I'll turn it back over to you if you'd like to finish up the night.
And so I would like to thank everyone. I'd like to start with the team, the staff, for helping get us through these evenings and trying to elicit feedback from our families and community members regarding what they feel are some priorities and how we should be prioritizing our budget to help improve outcomes for our kids. And secondly, I just want to thank everyone for their participation these last few days. I know we've had a couple of families who were here previously. I want to thank you. And then I know we have some new family members here this evening, and I want to thank you. We will make every effort to make sure that your priorities, you'll be able to see your priorities in the budget that will be presented to the board and the community. Grace and Ann are recording all of the comments, and the team and I will be looking at those recommendations by you and finding ways to incorporate them in the budget recommendations. And so we will, from this meeting on, we will be moving really fast. You saw a timeline posted earlier. We'll be looking to submit our budget to the city of Danbury no later than Valentine's Day. And
recording stopped.
And then officially, I believe it's in late March, Ann, when the city will approve or not approve of our budget. So we're looking forward to the process. Over the next couple of weeks and months, we'll be looking forward to further educating the school community about the budget and how you can help. And so your advocacy, I believe, is also important, whether it's with our local Board of Ed or City Council as well. I think it shows, and I think, again, the gains that we've made, the connections that we've made during the pandemic, I feel like we can continue to gain the support that we need to get the budget that the city deserves. So thanks again for everyone for joining, and we will see you soon. We will have a whole bunch of meetings next week, titled Finance on Monday and Tuesday, the 31st and the 1st. So thanks again for joining us tonight.